Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live again from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with part number 10 of 11 of One for Israel's anti-Semitic video, Rabbi Moshe Shulman exposing the truth. Welcome back, Rabbi.
Okay, how you doing?
Doing well. I'm enjoying this series quite a bit, mainly because there's a lot more information that is general purpose knowledge that's not just for One for Israel, but stuff that I've been hearing, like horrific claims for a long time from so many different sources. So,
yeah, well, in general, we ignore it because, there's sites out there and it's not important. The important thing here is we have a Jewish group there.
Right.
Just sending these anti-Semitic, bad enough that Dr. Brown has written things against it. If you have someone like Dr. Brown, who's not our best friend as far as he's concerned, who, is writing things, it's just horrible. And then the implications, of course, is very bad.
Right.
This one is going to be a fun.
Okay.
We're going to take a break a second. Until now, we've been reading all these quotes distorted and misunderstood about what's been said about the rabbis. So what we want to do is, in view of the famous principle of equal weights and measures, we're going to put the shoe on the other foot now. We're going to say, okay, you just talked about how Jews look at Gentiles in the world. And we pointed out to you that we believe that non-Jews, even a non-Jew, depends on what they do, and that non-Jews have a place in the world to come. So I think it's only fair we now look at what do Christians really think about Jews. So we're going to start in the New Testament, and then we're going to follow Christian history all the way up to our time. And we'll see what it looks like. Now, what do Christians think about Jews? The New Testament is quite clear about that. Let's start at Matthew 23:37. Jesus talking here. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. Okay, so that's a very nice thing to say. We know that in the Tanakh, whenever it refers to Jerusalem, it's referring to the whole Jewish people. So Jesus is saying, well, you're the people who kills everybody. What does it say in Luke 13:34? Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. Again, saying the same thing. Now, you might think that, okay, it doesn't mean it really so literally. Well, let's go back to Matthew 27, 24 and 25. I have to say that this particular verse has been the cause of the spilling of more Jewish blood than any passage in any book whatsoever that I know. This is verse 27 to 24. Excuse me, 27, 24 to 25. So here we're talking about there's the trial of Jesus, been already tried to be executed, and Pilate comes out with an imagined thing that's saying that you can take one person to be freed. Something's unknown as far as anybody's concerned before the Jewish holidays. We don't know if Josephus doesn't talk about that. So it says this. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. Okay, so Pilate is saying, hey, I got nothing to do with this guy. Okay, see to it yourselves. Okay, so he's saying to the Jewish people who are there, listen, he didn't do anything. You don't want him? You want this other guy to be freed? What do we do with him? Then the people as a whole answered, his blood be on us and on our children. His blood be on us and our children. So if you wonder where that whole thing of Christ killers came, that all the Jews were painted as if all of them, that source is Matthew 27, 24 to 25. Now that's not the only place, by the way. You might think that, well, maybe it's not really true, whatever. Well, let's go look at Acts 7, 51 to 52. And here it is. You stiff-necked people, uncircumcised in hearts and ears. You are forever opposing the Holy Spirit just as your ancestors used to do. So again, the whole Jewish people forever have always been against God. Which of the prophets did your ancestors not persecute? They killed those who foretold the coming of the righteous one, and now you become his betrayers and murderers, meaning you are betrayers and murderers of Jesus. Again, clearly accusing the Jewish people as a whole of being murderers. Now, if you have any doubt left, let's go to 1 Thessalonians. 3:15.
What book and verse you saying? Because there's no 3:15 in First
1
Thessalonians.
Thessalonians 3:15.
3 goes up to 13. It looks like.
Oh, 2:15. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. For you, brothers and sisters, became imitators of the churches of God in Christ Jesus that are in Judea. For you suffered the same thing from your own compatriots as they did from the Jews, who killed both the Lord Jesus and the prophets and drove us out. They displease God and oppose everyone. So what is Paul saying here? Jews killed Jesus, the prophets. Not only that, God hates them. If you ever wondered where these ideas come to the Christian people, that's where it was. Or even more, the Palestinians go around claiming that Jews kill Israelis, murders of innocent Palestinians. They do it. Where do they get that from? They get this idea from him. This bitter type of anti-Semitism came into the Arab world in the early 1900s. The story of the first blood libel that ever happened, it was in Syria, was brought about by a Catholic priest. I believe it was a Catholic priest, a priest there. And that's where it comes from. The idea that the Jews are murderers of God, murderers of Jesus, and all that kind of stuff. That's where it comes from. That's why not only can they say that, but you have half a world of Christians who actually believe it's true because of it. Now, that's one thing. What else? What about, we've already seen here that there's an indication that God hates them in Thessalonians, but there's even more. Romans 9:6-7. What's it say here? It is not as though the word of God had failed, for not all Israelites truly belong to Israel, and not all of Abraham's children are his true descendants. Okay? So Jews, you're not really Jews. He teaches here the real Jews, of course, are those people who believe in Jesus and his resurrection, stuff like that. So Jews aren't real Jews. And if you don't believe that, in Galatians 6:15-16, the world is one. For neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything, but a new creation is everything. So whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew by circumcision doesn't make a difference. It's only belief in Jesus. As for those who follow this rule, those who believe in Jesus, peace be upon them and mercy upon the Israel of God. Those who are believers in Jesus are the Israel of God, but if you're a Jew, you're no longer Israel anymore. And then we see Revelations, of course. This is the famous verses in 2:9 and 3:9. 2:9. It says, I know your affliction, your poverty, even though you are rich. I know the slander on the part of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Synagogue of Satan, you should remember, because that's going to come up in the future. Synagogue of Satan refers to the Jews in the place where they pray. 3:9, as the same thing. I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but are lying. Again, same thing we see before. Jews are not Jews. They're rejected from God and not considered Israel anymore. Now we see that this is taken up by the church throughout the ages, and we're going to actually go through it. We have quotes from throughout the ages of exactly what they say. But I want to read to you a quote from the Lutherans. on this issue here of what the New Testament says. Now, let me read this. As a matter of fact, there can be such a basis in biblical texts, talking about the attitude towards Jews. For example, Matthew 20-25, his blood be on us and our children, as I mentioned. It's not, I didn't make this, my friends. This is not me making it up. I got it from Christian sources who have been introspective after World War II, seeing what happened, results, how that's the result of almost 2,000 years of history, of hatred, where it came from, and admitting to themselves. Matthew 27-25, his blood will be upon us and our children, and Revelations 2:9-3:9, synagogue of Satan. What needs to be said is that while these expressions are there in the New Testament and have been used in terrible ways in the light of the message of the New Testament as a whole, there can be no justification excuse for anti-Semitism. So he says, listen, it says it there, but it doesn't really mean it. Okay, but it does mean it. And there is rivers of Jewish blood that are there because of it. Now I want to bring one more quote from him. Actually, multiple quotes from here. So let's read it. First one. Although such beasts are unfit to work, they are fit for killing. And this is what happened to the Jews. While they were making themselves unfit for work, they grew fit for slaughter. That was by the famous John Chrysostom. We're going to get to some stuff later. Next, we are even at fault in not avenging all this innocent blood of our Lord and of the Christians, which they shed for 300 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, and the blood of children they have shed since then. That's probably the blood libels, which still shines forth from their eyes and their skin. We are at fault in not slaying them. That is Martin Luther, the founder of the Protestant Reformation. Those of you who are evangelicals or Protestants, or have a theory of sola scriptura or stuff like that, that all goes back to Martin Luther. He's the one you like. The Church of Christ has never lost sight of the thought that the chosen people who nailed the Redeemer of the world to the cross must bear the curse for its action through a long history of suffering. This will be surprising. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Finally, I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator by defending myself against a Jew. I am fighting for the work of the Lord. Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. We see historically how this plays out until we get to the Holocaust. Now I'd like to just read one thing a little bit more. There's a very interesting book that came out by Simon Wiesenthal, in which he goes through every day of the year and different persecutions. I would just like to go through today and tomorrow and the next day. Now, I'm not going to do the things during World War II with the Nazis because that would take us too long, but I just want to do other things because it gives you a good idea of what the Jewish people had to suffer from the Christians over the years. August 2nd, that's today. 1391. 1391 is a year that should be in the back of your mind forever as far as Christian persecution. Year 1391 in Spain, there were a couple of priests who went out throughout Spain, forcibly converting Jews, and those who they didn't convert, they killed. It was convert or die. These Jews became the Marranos. Okay? So let's read what happened here today on August 2nd. In Palma de Mallorca, Balearic Islands, Spain, 300 Jews are massacred. Among them the Rabbi, Ephraim Garundi, when a crowd storms a Jewish quarter in the Christian houses where many Jews are hiding. However, 800 Jews find refuge in the castle of Palma and escape on ships to North Africa. So 300 out of 1,100 Jews there refused conversion and were executed. Okay, 1818, there was a riot in Würzburg, Germany, from anti-Semitic students. They plundered houses, and 400 Jewish inhabitants were sent out of that city. 1919 is very important. After World War II, what many people don't know, is the Ukrainians went throughout the Ukraine where Jews were living and had pogroms constantly. So in 1919, on this day, there was a 2-day pogrom. 11 Jews are slaughtered and 2 Jewish women are repeatedly raped by units of Zeleny, who was part of the Ukrainian National Army. Okay. Tomorrow, August 3rd. August 3rd, 1492. This is another date you should remember, August 3rd, 1492. According to the edict signed in March 31 by the Spanish sovereigns Ferdinand and Isabella, all Jews are to have left Spain by this date. Every non-baptized Jew found in Spain thereafter is subject to death. Okay, so tomorrow is the anniversary of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain who did not convert. Okay. 1603, there's an auto de fe in Lisbon, which they killed a few people. Okay, 1648 is another date you should remember. People don't remember it, but we do. 1648 was a year in which the Cossacks from the Ukraine came through and slaughtered 1/3 of the Jewish population in Eastern Europe. Now, he says 640 on this day, August 3rd, which is tomorrow, the Cossack hordes of Bogdan Khmelnytsky slaughtered 200 Jews of Alek, Ukraine. In Kiev, there is a statue for Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was a national hero of the Ukraine, whose claim to fame was slaughtering 1/3 of the Jews in Eastern Europe. August 4th, 1904, 22 Jews were wounded and 1 adult and a child were killed in an anti-Semitic riot in Poland. 1919, more 200 Jews were slaughtered by the Ukrainians, again going through. Okay, August 5th, the next day, and I guess we can leave it here after that. 1243 in Bavaria, a number of Jewish men and women were killed because of a blood libel. They said to use blood for the making of the matzahs. Many Jews killed from that. 1391 again, many Jews were massacred in Toledo, Spain, and in Barcelona, 250 were massacred. 1904, there is a riot in Poland, and they killed 20 Jews, wounded 20 Jews. 1934, there was another pogrom. That was actually not a Christian country. The 6th in 1264, 5 Jews were killed, including a number of rabbis. 1919, more pogroms from the Ukrainians. August 7th, 1391, again in Spain, 200 Jews of Barcelona who had taken refuge were massacred. And on and on and on. These years come up again and again and again. All of these were the ways Christians dealt with Jews in the exile based on what happened in what the New Testament says. Okay, so now let's continue. Where does this come from? We have the New Testament, and then we have a whole history. So where do these come from? Well, the first thing is, we learned before, which we mentioned in the beginning of our talks, that Bishop Melito of Sardis was the first one who came out with the idea of Jews killing God. But there's more. Justin Martyr, who was also 2nd century. Here's what he says. The true spiritual Israel and descendants of Jacob, Judah, Jacob, Israel, and Abraham are we who have been led to God through the crucified Christ. We who are of Christ are the true Israelite race. Remember, this is a replacement. Jews are no longer Jews. They're nothing and they can be killed. Okay? More? Oh, here it is. Sorry. Origin. Origen was an extremely important person. Says this, we say with confidence that they will never be restored to their former condition, for they committed a crime of the most unhallowed kind in conspiring against the Savior of the human race. So the Jews will always be subject. By the way, this is the reason why the Catholic Church did not want to recognize Israel at all, because it was a very serious problem with their theology. Now, another very famous person, Gregory of Nyssa. If you don't know Catholic theology, you wouldn't know who he is, but he was extremely important as far as Catholic theology. He lived in the 4th century. He refers to the Jews, slayers of the Lord, murderers of the prophets, enemies of God, haters of God, adversaries of grace, enemies of their father's faith, advocates of the devil, brood of vipers, slanderers, scoffers, men of darkened minds, leaven of the Pharisees, congregation of demons, sinners, wicked men, stoners, and haters of goodness. Obviously, somebody you don't want for your next door neighbor. Okay? This is what Christians taught. And again, isn't that really what it says in Thessalonians? Isn't it really what it says in Revelations? Isn't that what it says in Galatians? Isn't that what it says there? These people didn't make it up from anywhere from there. It came to them from what they were taught in the religion. Now let's go to the next one. This is our friend Chrysostom. Chrysostom is probably the most quoted on these things, but because he was just so good at it. So here, let's just read some things until we get tired of it. What page is it? 26, 27. Okay. Here he says, the synagogue is worse than a brothel, with a den of scoundrels and the assassins of Christ. A house worse than a drinking shop, a den of thieves, a house of ill fame. And about the Jewish people, I'd say the same thing about their souls. As for me, I hate the synagogue. I hate the Jews for the same reason. Hate. Supposedly religion of love. What else does he say? When animals have been fattened by having all they want to eat, they get stubborn and hard to manage. When animals are unfit for work, they are marked for slaughter. And this is the very thing that the Jews have experienced. By making themselves unfit for work, they have become ready for slaughter. This is why Christ said, as for my enemies who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slay them before me. Any doubt as to why Jewish people were slaughtered by the Christians throughout the Middle Ages? Killers of Christ, Matthew, just like the Lutheran said, Matthew. Revelation, clearly there stated. Okay, let's some more. Since there are some who think the synagogue as a holy place, I must say a few words to them. Why do you reverence that place? Must you not despise it, hold it in an abomination, run away from it? The answer is the law and the books of the prophets are kept there. What is this? Will any place where these books are be a holy place? By no means. This is the reason of all why I hate the synagogue of Boaz. Again, it is the time for me to show that demons dwell in the synagogue, not only the place itself, but also in the souls of Jews. As Christ said, when an unclean spirit has gone out, he walks to dry places seeking rest. If he doesn't find it, he says, I shall return to my house. And coming, he finds it empty, swept, and garnished. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter into him, and the last state of that man is made worse than the first. So shall it be also to his generations. Do you see that demons dwell in their souls, and that these demons are more dangerous than the ones of old? And this is very reasonable. All right. I think we can go on again and again and again. Chrysostom, there's more venom here. His venom is pretty much well known, but that was in the soul of Christians throughout the generations. Throughout the generations, all the slaughters of Jews came about because of that. But there were other views. Let's look at Augustine. What did Augustine say? The Jews held him, the Jews insulted him, the Jews bound him, they crowned him with thorns, dishonored him by spitting upon him. They scourged him, they heaped abuses upon him, they hung him upon a tree, and they pierced him with a lance. So what does he say? He continues here saying, it is clear according to Augustine, the divine malediction they called upon themselves has been heard. They're destined to be slaves. The salvation nation, but not for their own. They witness by their scriptures and serve as slave librarian of the church. Likewise, they give witness by the dispersion and their woes. Like Cain, they carry a sign, but are not to be killed. So Augustine came up with the theory that the Jewish people are to be held in subjugation, but not to be killed. So he was pretty nice. Others weren't as nice as him, but he was pretty nice. At least they couldn't be killed, but they were kept in subjugation. Now this continues on and on. This is like the pre-Middle Ages, early parts of the Middle Ages. Let's go into the Middle Ages itself. And the next place, let's go Pope Gregory. He was about 1089, 81, excuse me. Now, Pope Gregory, writing to Alfonso VI of Castile, says this: "We admonish your highness that you must cease to suffer the Jews to rule over Christians, exercise authority over them. For to allow Christians to be subordinate to Jews and to be subject to the judgment is the same as to oppose God's church and to exalt the synagogue of God. To wish to please the enemies of Christ mean to treat Christ himself contumely." So if you're good to a Jewish person, you're attacking Jesus himself. Attacking Jesus himself. Let's see, I have another one here somewhere. Okay, let's find this one here. Saint Bernard, not the dog, but the famous Saint Bernard. Right here, page. Yeah, consult the pages of Holy Writ. I know what is written in the Psalms as prophecy about the Jews. God hath shown me, says the church, thou shalt not slay my enemies, neither shall my people ever be forgotten. They are living signs to us, representing the Lord's passion. And this is a continuation of Augustine. For this reason, they are dispersed to all regions, that they may pay the penalty of so great a crime, that they may be witnesses of our redemption. So all the Jewish people are supposed to suffer because supposedly they did something. Another instance here, let's go a little bit further. When we get to the Inquisition, when we get to the Crusades, one of the persons who was very much responsible was someone called Peter the Venerable. So here's what he says, Peter the Venerable. "O Jew, it seems to me that I have provided satisfaction on those issues that have been placed in question, though both sacred authorities and through reason for any man. If indeed for any man, then likewise for you. If in fact you are a man, indeed I dare not designate you a man, lest I lie." Now they complain that we consider non-Jews as animals. So specifically here, they're not men. "For I see that in you is extinguished, indeed buried, that which separates man from animals and beasts and raises man above them, reason." All right. So Peter the Venerable, very important. Now, during the Middle Ages, of course, there were the Crusades, and there were a lot of things. This constant preaching of either total subjugation or murder, either one, led to many things happening. So during the Crusades in 1096, in Germany, the Crusades surrounded the synagogue of Speyer. Unable to break into, they attacked any Jew they could find outside, killing 11 of them. One of the victims, a woman, preferred death to conversion. The only choice left open by the Crusaders inaugurated a tradition of freely accepting martyrdom. Okay? One of the first people to martyrdom not to be converted. In Jerusalem, the city was captured here, and everybody was killed and burnt in fire. England. This one I want to remember because I was told that there is a prohibition that came down as tradition to spend the night in the city of York. So this is what occurred in York on the 6th and 17th of March in 1190 in England. The worst outrage took place in York, where a number of local nobles in heavy debt to the Jews seized the opportunity to rid themselves of their burden. When attacked, the Jews took refuge in the castle keep, which the guard had opened for them. Those who remained in the town were slaughtered. On the refusal to allow access to the keep, the Jews were besieged. On March 16th, on the eve of Passover, the Rabbi Yom Tov ben Isaac of Germany, realizing that all hope was lost, asked his brethren to choose suicide rather than submit to baptism. First setting fire to their possessions, one after the other killed himself. More than 150 died in this way, and the few survivors who were willing to accept baptism were murdered by the mob, who also destroyed the registers and debts to the Jews. Again and again, we see again and again what happens. This is what goes on constantly. Now, there were many other things. I'll just give a few more examples in the Middle Ages, then we can move on to the more modern times, where the story is not really much different. Okay. In Röttingen, In 1298, word went about the Jews had desecrated the host. That means for the Eucharist. Rindfleisch, a nobleman, stirred up the modern and the entire Jewish community to the stake. Then ziehen as Judenschächters, Judenschächter means Jew slaughterers, marched through Germany and Austria, pillaging, burning, and murdering Jews as they went. Estimates placed the murdered at 100,000, decimating communities at 140. However, the emperor fined the cities where the atrocities occurred. So, in answer, he fined him because he lost all the money from that. But that's what happened. Where does this come from? The desecration of the host was because they believed that since the Jews killed Christ, they would desecrate the host, meaning that they would stab the host, which they believed that transfiguration, they believed that Jesus actually became the host. So they figured that the Jews hated Jesus so much, they would stab it again. 100,000 people were murdered and 140 cities destroyed. Okay. What about when the Black Death came? Well, of course, it had to be the Jews who were responsible. It is impossible to determine the extent of Jewish casualties during these years. In all, over 200 Jewish communities, large and small, were destroyed. The massacres were greatest in Germany, where every sizable city was affected, and perhaps least in Austria because of the wholehearted intervention of Albert II. One may imagine the scope of the tragedy by the 10,000 casualty reported in Poland, where they were comparatively light. Well over 10,000 were killed in Erfurt, Mainz, and Brussels alone. That was because Jews were accused of having poisoned the wells, bringing on the Black Plague, which we know now is the bubonic plague, which actually came from Asia. Now, finally, we'll give an end to it, is the expulsion of Spain was basically the end of Jewish life in Spain, and basically is considered pretty much the decision making. On January 2nd, 1492, while still in Granada, Ferdinand and Isabella issued the fatal decree. All Jews must leave the realm by July 30th under the penalty of death, since, in the words of the decree, Jews seduce the new Christians, and the expulsion is only efficacious means of putting an end to these evils. Stunned by the edict, powerful Jews led by Abraham Senior, chief rabbi and tax collector, offered an enormous sum of money to the king, who was known for avariciousness, meaning like bribe him off. The story is told that at the critical moment, as Ferdinand reconsidered his decision, Torquemada rushed onto the scene. Remember Torquemada, we mentioned earlier, was actually of Jewish descent. Torquemada rushed onto the scene, holding a crucifix, and said, "Judas Iscariot sold Christ for 30 pieces of silver. Will your highness sell him for 300,000 ducats? Here he is, take him and sell him." Upon which the king held fast to his decree. Okay? The expulsion from Spain would not have occurred had it not been for Jews like our One for Israel friends egging on persecution of the Jewish people. So that's basically, I really want to do shortly, I did pretty shortly most of what happened in the Middle Ages. We know basically you go almost every year, every 10 years, 15 years, going through very horrible things that happen. So let's now move into the modern age, the Reformation. What did Martin Luther say? We already had one quote, but let's do another one. Perhaps I would So here's what it said. First, their synagogue should be set on fire. Secondly, their homes should likewise be broken down and destroyed. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and Talmuds. Fourthly, the rabbis must be forbidden under the threat of death to teach anyone. So to get the idea what's going on here, that was Martin Luther. There's more of that, but I'll just leave that for now. Now, another important personage, following the same footsteps as Martin Luther. And this was Pope Paul IV. Excuse me. Since it is completely senseless and inappropriate to be in a situation where Christian Peter allows the Jews whose guilt, all of their undoing, has condemned them to eternal slavery, acts to our side, even to live among us. If you wonder how it was possible that in Europe, supposedly educated people could go about murdering that many Jews. Just remember what this Pope said, and let's listen to another one. From 1933. This was written by the German Lutheran Gerhard Kittel. Kittel was one of the greatest New Testament scholars in Germany in the early 20th century. We're not talking about somebody who wasn't important. He was a very serious, important person. Rather, Jews should accept discrimination and defamation as the lot. Let them be treated as guests in a foreign land. Second class, beleaguered guests, of course. After all, they were Jews, weren't they? Who in obedience take on themselves the suffering and disperse authentic Judaism abides by the symbol of the stranger, wandering restless and homeless on the face of the earth. He was, in fact, the pastor for the Nazis. Okay, let's do one more. This is very interesting. There were, over the years, many different decrees based on these things that we've read here from the New Testament further, that were applied to the Jewish people. So let me just read some of them. There's a nice comparison here. Prohibition of intermarriage and sexual intercourse between Christians and Jews, 306 AD. Jews and Christians not permitted to eat together, 306 AD. That's Synod Elvira, in other words. Jews not allowed to hold public office, Synod of Clermont, 535. Jews not permitted to show themselves in the streets during Passion Week, 538 AD. All these were laws in Germany. Burning the Talmud and other books, 12th Synod of Toledo, 681 AD. The marking of Jews clothes with a badge. The Fourth Lateran Council, 1215 AD. Construction of new synagogue prohibited, Council of Oxford, 1222. Compulsory ghettos in Brasso, 1267. Christians not permitted to sell or rent real estate, 1279. Jews not permitted to obtain academic degrees, Council of Basel, 1434. All of these things were followed by the Nazis when they came into power. Now, one would think, and we do see some indications after the Holocaust, maybe things like that would change, maybe the direction, but we don't see that actually. Oops. All right, here. Okay. Now, in 1977, the patriarch of the Antiochian Orthodox Church, that's an Eastern Orthodox Church, not a Roman Catholic Church, says this: as far as we Christians are concerned, we are the new Israel. All the prophecies of the Old Testament were fulfilled by the coming of the Messiah. After the destruction of the temple, the Jews were dispersed. Those who remained lived in peace until modern times when outsiders came into the land. That's why opposition for the state of Israel comes from, obviously. But there's more. Let's go more modern discussions here. It gets worse before it gets better, believe me. Okay. Now, let's start. Okay. Yeah. Okay. A Christian leader, his name is Wiles. The power of the Israeli America is the most determinative force in America. Our culture has been decimated through abortion, pornography, sexual liberation, filthy, raunchy movies, television, etc., all of it owned by the synagogue of Satan, meaning the Jewish people. Reference Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, if you're not missing. I cannot be the gospel and not confront the synagogue of Satan, even if it costs me my life. A day is coming when Christians are going to lose their lives as they confront the synagogue of Satan. You cannot stand for Jesus Christ and righteousness in this world without confronting the synagogue of Satan. Continues Michael Jones. The church is faced with a choice. She can follow the plan of attempting to fight abortion, gay marriage, and all of the other ills she opposes policemen, continue to fight as she has failed in the past half century, or she can work for the conversion of the group that is responsible for virtually every social ill in our day, from wars in the Middle East to the pornography and gay marriage at home, namely the Jews. Jews are guilty of everything, around whose evil machinations the acts of history turns. If the church wants to have its history back, that it will have to contend with the Jews once again as the apostles and the church fathers did 2,000 years. What the church fathers did 2,000 years? Persecution. As soon as the church had power, they persecuted the Jews. Okay, let's continue. Knox Theological Seminary. Knox Theological Seminary. Here's what they have to say. Yeah. Fort Lauderdale. An open to evangelicals and other interest parties claim that God's promise to Abraham do not apply to any particular ethnic group, but to the Church of Jesus Christ, the true Israel. That the third temple is the church that Jesus promised to build, that no Testament writer foresaw a regathering of ethnic Israel to the land, and that the promised Messianic kingdom of Jesus Christ has been inaugurated. Okay, N.T. Wright, a very, very important Christian scholar in the modern era. N.T. Wright. Second, let's see. What's the quote here? Second. Yeah. Here it is. This is brought in the book about him. Perhaps the most articulate proponent of this transference theology today is N.T. Wright, who has spent the last 40 years writing about the relationship of the church and Israel in Paul's theology. Wright argues that through the coming of Christ, God's relationship with the Jewish people has been reconfigured so that Israel's coming blessings, responsibilities, and calling have all been transferred to the church as a whole, thus resulting in erasure of divinely given Jewish boundary markers of identity. Or to put more politely correct language, the boundary markers have all been universalized. Okay? Noam Atik, a Palestinian Christian leader, puts it this way. The New Testament thus reinterprets the promise of the land in the light of Christ. A good example of this is Romans 4:13, where Paul says something quite revolutionary. Yet nowhere in the Old Testament was Abraham given a promise relating to the whole world. Instead, Paul has taken the promise made to Abraham concerning the land and has reinterpreted in the light of the coming of Christ. So in the light of the universal fulfillment in Christ, the narrow Old Testament promises regarding the land have acquired new meaning. They are now seen to be transitory and provisional in their intention. In simple words, is Israel as a state is totally illegitimate, having no reason to exist at all. And in fact, anti-Israel and anti-Jewish things always come together. And we have, of course, a few quotes of that. There is the Jerusalem Declaration on Christian Zionism on 22 August 2006. We categorically reject Christian Zionist doctrines as false teaching that corrupts the biblical message of love, justice, and reconciliation. With urgency, we warn that Christian Zionism and its alliance are justifying colonization, apartheid, and empire building. Strongly anti-Israel. Church of Scotland. What do they have to say about it? Here it is. Christian Zionism seeks ultimately to use the Jewish Zionist cause in order to achieve its own theological and political reality with dire consequences. The Christian Zionist worldview has cataclysmic consequences for religiously integrated and lasting peace in Palestine. Israel, Christian Zionism betrays an unjust God with unjust people and seeks to exclude and expel and arguably eliminate whatever is perceived to be alien to its cause. Okay, there's another famous, he's an Anglican, Dr. Sizer, who's probably pretty well known. The representative can therefore advocate love for the Jew while being able to reject his anti-Christian nation that persecutes Christians and butchers other people who need Christ just as much as they butchers other people. Remember, where does this come from? It comes from the New Testament teaching that the Jewish people butcher the prophets and other things. That's where this comes from. Now, just to end with the modern times, there's a quote here that's brought January 16, 2019, an article says, some of the Democratic Party's brightest new stars believe Israel is a rogue state that should be treated as apartheid South Africa. It's the latest sign that after 50 years, support for Israel is no longer a bipartisan cause, a dramatic change that will be felt in the wide open Democratic presidential primary. As we've seen, actually, that's actually the case. The Democratic Party is the most anti-Israel now than it's ever been in its history. And as we know also, these views are now common mainstream Christian. But you might say, okay, listen, we do know that there are Christian Zionists, they seem to be very favorable to Israel. What's about that? I mean, don't say positive things. You're broadcasting through these times, that was the case, but maybe it's not, maybe that's not the case completely. So that's true. So let's look at some quotes of Christians who have said positive things here, because it's important to see it. Robert Langton was a 17th century person who said this. They forget a main point for the church's glory, who pray not daily for the conversion of the Jews. Praying for the conversion of the Jews. The truth of the matter is the church also prayed for that, the Catholic Church, while they were persecuting. So that's not really so much of a big thing. But let's look at another one here. Andrew Bonner says that Israel is the everlasting nation, who are to be life from the dead to all nations, and who are to be life from the dead to all nations. What it means here is very simple. Right now, Israel is dead. There will be resurrection, as it says in Romans, that in the end, all of Israel will be saved. But that's not right now. Right now, we're dead. And the sure word of prophecy declares, he that scattered Israel shall gather them. I will give them one heart and one way. Okay, continue. Israel restored. Okay. Here, F.F. Bruce, very famous person, very famous Christian scholar, very well known. And he says that Israel's blindness is only partial and only temporary. The new covenant will not be complete until it embraces the people of the old covenant. Again, love for Israel, but love for Israel with what? Condition. The condition is that they're going to be accepting Jesus. If they don't, then there's that way forever. Again, Simon, named Charles Simon, said this. He was in the 19th century. Once in a mission meeting, Simon had seemed so carried away with the future of the Jews that a friend passed him a slip of paper with the question, 6 millions of Jews and 600 millions of Gentiles. Which is the most important? Simon at once scribbled back, if the conversion of the 6 is to be life from the dead to the 600, what then? Meaning that, yeah, we love Jews, but why do we love Jews? In order to convert them. Now, this should not be considered so, strange in a way, because remember the quote I gave earlier about Martin Luther, of his bitter hatred for the Jews? Well, that was towards the end of his life. In the beginning of life, he loved Jews, but why did he love Jews? The Jew was viewed by the Christians demonic, antichrist, criminal, blasphemous, heretical, and either blind or stubbornly recalcitrant to Jewish Christian truth. The Jew was neither considered to believe or to worship the true God. Rather, the Jew was considered to be an agent in allying worship of Satan. Oops, sorry, that was a quote from somebody else. Here's what he said, I'm sorry. Perhaps I will attract some of the Jews to the Christian faith. Again, everything positive he's going to say about Jews is under the condition of what? That I will bring them to the Christian faith. For our fools, the popes, bishops, sophists, monks, the coarse blockheads, have until this time so treated the Jews that if I had been a Jew and I had seen such idiots and blockheads ruling and teaching the Christian religion, I would rather have been a sow than a Christian. They have dealt with the Jews as if they were dogs and not human beings. Well, of course they consider dogs, because that's what they're preaching. Chrysostom literally preached that. So we do see the positive things. What are the positive things? The positive things are there. Why? For conversion. If we allow them to come to Israel and convert our children, stuff like that, then they'll be nice to us, like Luther. Luther was nice to the Jews, and only for one reason. It was quite clear, and he makes it quite clear. His only reason for being nice is to convert them to Christianity. Now, we see actually this happening out today. There's an instance in Israel that came now, and we're going to see how this plays out. But already there's been some negative feedback from it. In Israel, there is a cable television called Hot TV. And they had approached them from Christians, because there's Christians in Israel, wanting to have, some kind of Christian broadcasting. Greatest story ever told, all kinds of things like that. Because, unlike us, those who listen to ex-Christians or me who knows a lot about Christianity, we know a little bit more about what these people are about. So they approached God TV, which is supposedly a very big thing in America, trying to get some Christian broadcasting to bring in some money for things. What they didn't know was God TV had something called Shalom, the purpose of which, according even to the founder, the people in there, and everybody was, to not just give, those simple Christian things telling what Christianity was about, but actually to evangelize and to attempt to convert Jewish people. When this came out, there was a firestorm that came out over there. There was an interview with Ron Cantor, one of the people there, and Ron Cantor was extremely careful not to say that they were going to be converting, because when he came close to it, the interviewer showed a very strong anti-missionizing activity on Israeli television. This is not something that's just from the right-wing people who look like me or religious people. This is something all over Israel. All Israelis do not like the idea. Why? Because we remember back our history. We were forced into listening to conversion sermons in Spain and other places all the time. We just want to be left alone by the Christians. Okay, if somebody converts to Christianity, it's one thing, but that the Christians have a television station to convert Jews in the land of Israel? No. So what happened? It was coming, and we see a lot of Christians are very angry about it. And we're going to see whether they're like Luther, that really their only intention was converting Jews, which is what I think is going to happen. And I'd love to be proven wrong, but I'm quite certain that that's exactly what's going to happen, is eventually the real true Christian anti-Semitism will come out when they see they're being blocked from being able to convert Jews to Christianity. When Jews put up a fight and say, we're not going to let you convert us, we're not going to let you take us away from God. When they see that, then they're going to become the later Luther, who comes out and says burning synagogues, keeping rabbis from doing everything against the Jewish people. Because that's the way to tell if they have real love. If they really have love for Israel and the Jewish people, then what's going to happen is they will recognize, we understand we overstepped a boundary. And by the way, the Mormons have a center in Israel, and they wrote a contract they would not missionize, and they don't. They followed their contract. Although the Mormons are the biggest missionary organization in the world, they're growing by leaps and bounds because of it. Still, they recognized, and they had respect for the Jewish people, understanding history and understanding Jewish beliefs, that, they'll be there. If somebody comes to them to convert, they'll convert, but otherwise, they'll be left alone. So we're going to see now what happens with the evangelicals in America, how they're going to react to the Jewish people putting their foot down and say, listen, that's a red line. You want to be here and help us out. If you really love Jewish people, you think in the end, so fine. But let's see what happens. Now, this video that we've seen so far actually shows us where one for Israel is going to step down, where they hold on. Do they hold like the neo-Nazis and the Luthers and all those other people who really hate the Jewish people, and any kind of positive thing they have towards Israel is only because they're allowed to missionize? Or is it that they are going to be, otherwise? I think this is clearly another reason why we should be very leery about one for Israel, even more than anything else that they have in the thing, is that they have a long tradition of Christianity, and they don't seem to have separated. They're a clear and present danger to the state of Israel, because their allegiance is not towards Israel and to Jews. It's only towards their Christianity and their ability to missionize. And whether they do it with truth or with lies, as Paul says, the important thing is that they should win souls. So that's for tonight. I could have gone on more
Gotcha. No worries.
about the history of anti-Semitism, because there's much more. I just wanted to give a flavor of how this is not something that just started in Nazi Germany. It's not something that's small. Slaughters of Jews,
Right.
based on New Testament stuff, was going on for a long time, and it's still here. So much worse than anything that they can say about the rabbis, they should be saying about their own religion.
No kidding. Wow. All right. Well, cool. It's definitely. I'm really thinking about adding this to a whole new series. We'll talk about it later. There's a lot of good information here, so no doubt about it.
Well,
So
I am definitely going to have to redo some of this stuff again, because when I get back to Dr. Brown's book, the first book actually talks about anti-Semitism.
gotcha. Okay.
And so I'm going to discuss that situation.
Okay. Right on. Well, that sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, and thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to share these videos with your friends, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on notifications, and we will see you later. Y'all have a great week, and Rabbi, you have a great week as well.
Okay?
Okay. Thanks.
ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה.
אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור